Hello friends, now we are going to discuss a very interesting and a very popular essay written by Francis Bacon titled Of Studies. A very characteristic speciality about Francis Bacon is that he doesn't bother about an introduction for his essay. He delves right into the topic. So let us start reading the essay. This is how it begins. Actually, I would love to read the whole essay to you, because usually in class that is what I do. I read the whole essay once so that the students get a feel of it. But then we are not going to do that now. So let's take it sentence by sentence. So this is how the essay goes. Studies. So the title is Of Studies. Studies serve for delight, for ornament, and for ability. The chief use for delight is in privateness and retiring, for ornaments is in discourse, and for ability is in the judgment and disposition of business. For expert men can execute and perhaps judge of particulars one by one, but the general counsels and the plots and marshalling of affairs come best from those that are learned. What he says is this, that studies, your studies need not be interpreted as education alone. It also oftentimes in this essay, by studies he means reading books, taking into your mind what you read, that process. Okay, so it is not exactly the schooling or the official kind of education that he is referring to. So he says studies or reading has three benefits. One, it delights you. Two, it serves as an ornament, and three, it enhances your ability. And then he goes on to elaborate on each one of them. The chief use for delight is in privateness, that is, it is when you are alone, when you want to relax, that you take up a book for reading, and then reading becomes the chief use of reading there, it is delight. Then for ornaments is in discourse. What he means there is, if you are a person who is well read, you can, when you are engaging in discourses, maybe in debates or arguments, or when you give a speech, or when you're writing something about a certain topic, your reading will help you to ornament your arguments. It will help you in the betterment of what you are trying to say. And for ability, he says, it is in the judgment and disposition of business. That is, if you are a person who is well read, who is trained in a certain line of business, it will improve your judgment of things. And then he goes on to say, for expert men can execute, that is, and perhaps judge of particulars one by one, but the general counsel. So what he means there is that people who are experts, or people who are adept at certain things, people who have this innate ability to do things, to execute things, they can manage quite well even without reading. But then when it comes to the marshalling of affairs, the organizing of things and managing of things, the best is it is done by people who are educated. So that is, so you can see how in that one sentence so much of matter is packed in. I guess I can go on speaking longer on this sentence, but this I am just giving you the bare minimum of what he means there. Then he goes on to another aspect regarding studies. To spend too much time in studies is sloth. To use them too much for ornament is affectation. To make judgment wholly by the rules is the humor of a scholar. So it is good, it is true that studies is serves for entertainment, it gives you a lot of delight, but if you're going to read and read and read and do nothing else, spending too much of time on reading is actually a sign of sloth or laziness. So it is not good to spend too much time on reading. And again, if you use it too much for ornament, it is affectation. That is, if you're going to always air your learning, and if you're going to show off what you have read and use it too much to ornament your arguments and speech, that would seem very artificial. That is what he means by affectation. People would think you're showing off, you're not being genuine. And the third one, to make judgment wholly by the rules, is the humor of a scholar. That is, it is true that studies would help you to make better judgments, but then if you are going to go only by the books, and then that would be the humor of a scholar. That is what a scholar would do. That is, in practical life, a person can't always follow things by the book. He has to make adjustments, or he has to take into consideration the practical elements, and so going strongly and strictly by the book again is not a desirable quality. And then he goes on to yet another idea. They perfect nature and are perfected by experience. For natural abilities are like natural plants that need pruning by study. And studies themselves do give forth the directions too much at large, except they be bounded in by experience. Now he tells us the importance of experience. They perfect nature, that is, they studies kind of refine your character, they make you more sophisticated. At the same time, to use your studies in the most appropriate manner, you need to have the experience of life. It is life experiences which will hone the skills that you have gained through your studies. And he gives a wonderful comparison there. He says natural abilities are like natural plants, and they need to be pruned. So if you allow a plant to grow, they'll just grow wild, going in all directions. But then when you prune them, what happens is it will look more beautiful, and the plant would remain more healthy, that is. And so that is why he says natural abilities are like natural plants, they should be pruned by experience. So it is not enough if you just learn things, but you also need experience to supplement what you gain from your education. Crafty men condemn studies. Now each of these sentences are actually very popular. You might have found them quoted often. Now this is again a very famous sentence. Crafty men condemn studies, simple men admire them, and wise men use them. So this is why I mentioned in one of the earlier videos on Bacon's prose style that Bacon's sentences are very sibylline. That is the word I used, very terse and pithy and full of matter. And again, I have compared Bacon's style of writing to Thiruvalluvar, the Tamil writer, who in 2 lines, in small couplets, condenses a world of meaning. So same way, this sentence, crafty men condemn studies, simple men admire them, and wise men use them, can be interpreted that way too. It has a lot of meaning. So crafty men means men who are very shrewd, who are very intelligent, maybe in the crooked way, who are very witty in the sense, who have a lot of intelligence. So such men condemn studies, because they can manage life even without studies, because they are born with that innate ability of shrewdness. And so such people would condemn studies. They would say that studies is of no use. Now that is one extreme. And on the other side you have simple men, that is men who have not learnt much, who are not educated. They stand in awe of education. They admire them. So they are always bewildered and kind of awestruck by learning and education and educated people. Whereas the best ones are the wise men, because the wise men know how to use them. So wise men are the ones who make the best use of the knowledge they gain from reading. For they teach not their own use, but that is a wisdom without them and above them, won by observation. So he says, books never tell you how to use them. Books only give you knowledge. How you use the knowledge is a knowledge that you gain from your life experience. Okay, so that is the first paragraph of the essay of studies. Now let's go on to the second paragraph. This is how it goes. Read not to contradict and confute, not to believe and take for granted, not to find talk and discourse, but to weigh and consider. Okay, that is one essay, one line that stands in itself. And so what he says there is, never read to contradict and confute. Don't read in order to strengthen your arguments. Don't read in order to prove others are wrong. Contradict is to go against somebody, argue, that is. Confute again is prove somebody false. So don't read with the aim of gathering information just in order to argue and fight with others or to establish your beliefs. Again he says, never read to believe and take for granted. Okay, so don't believe everything that you read. Always when you read something, give some consideration to it. Think about what you have read, and don't just take things for granted. Now when I read this, I am always reminded of newspapers and media. That is what happens when you read news in the newspaper. As soon as you read something, you just take for granted that it is true. And maybe a few years ago, before social media became so kind of accessible to people, there was this kind of a situation where if something comes in the newspaper about a person, that is the end of it. If there is a news that somebody has done something wrong, somebody has been arrested for corruption, and people wouldn't even think, they wouldn't even pause to think whether this is true or not. Even a person who knows you who have known you for so many years, if there's something about you in the newspaper, immediately they'll say that, oh, this is true, so this person did that. They will never bother even to verify whether what was read was true. Can it be true? I have known this person for so long, so there is no chance the person would do this. No such thing. You read it and you take it in and you believe it. So Bacon says that don't ever just believe what you read or take it for granted. What he means is that you should think about analyze what you read before you really believe it. And then he says not to find, talk and discourse. Don't read just in order to find some matter to talk about, just because you want to impress somebody, just because you want to show people that you are somebody. Don't read for that purpose too. Instead, read to weigh and consider. So when you read something, you should genuinely have the intention of weighing what you read, of considering, of thinking about it, of analyzing it, of looking at the pros and cons. So that is the correct way of reading. Then he goes on. The next sentence now is very different from this. It's all about reading, but various diverse ideas about reading. The second sentence in that paragraph, some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. I'm sure that most of you have heard this sentence. Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. He elaborates on that. That is, some books are to be read only in parts, others to be read but not curiously, and some few to be read wholly and with diligence and attention. Okay, so some books are just to be tasted, in the sense he says that you don't have to read the whole book. There are different kinds of books of varying quality, books of various topics. So some books which are not very of a very kind of a high quality, you just have to read parts of the books. You just have to skip through the pages, and that would give you an idea about the book. Others are to be swallowed. So when you swallow a tablet, what happens is you don't get a taste of it actually. You just pour some water and put the tablet in and it goes in. So same way, some other books you have to read them, but then you don't have to really spend much thought on them. That's what he means by saying not curiously. You don't have to spend time pondering on it and thinking about what is there, because there would be nothing in such kind of books. Whereas the third category of books, he says, some few are to be read wholly and with diligence and attention. And earlier he said that such books are to be chewed and digested. This third category of books are to be read with a lot of diligence. Diligence means care and interest. So like the books that you study for your when you study for your exams, your textbooks, you would have to go very deep into them and study it with a lot of attention and care. So that is the third category. Okay, so he has spoken here about 3 types of books. And now he speaks about the next sentence: some books also may be read by deputy and extracts made of them by others, but that would be only in less important arguments and the meaner sorts of books. Else, distilled books are like common distilled waters, flashy things. So, he adds to that earlier point and he says, some books you need not even read them in the original. You can just read, you can get somebody else to tell you a summary. That is what he means by read in deputy. Maybe somebody else can read it for you, or you can just read an abstract of the book, or that's what he says, extracts made of them by others. But then he says, but this kind of reading would apply only to the meaner sort of books. Good books are not to be read this way. And he says, distilled books would be like common distilled waters, flashy things. That is, distilled water he believes is it is tasteless, and so distilled books, that is books that are read by somebody else in deputy, or the books of which you read only an abridged version or a summary, would be as tasteless as distilled waters. So that paragraph is about the different kinds of books. As I told you, if you want to, you can go on reading meanings into this one paragraph. Now the next one: reading maketh a full man, conference ready man, and writing an exact man. And therefore, if a man write little, he had need have a great memory. If he confer little, he had need have a present wit. And if he read little, he had need have much cunning, to seem to know that he doth not. Okay, this again is a very popular, often quoted sentence. So when you read Bacon, it would seem like a string of quotations. That is because he is so popular. Many people don't even know who wrote this. They don't even know it's Bacon. But then the sentences are very popular. So reading makes a full man, conference a ready man, writing an exact man. So what he says is reading, a person who reads a lot becomes a full man. That is a well-informed man, a very knowledgeable man. That is a full man. Okay? And conference, that is, some people read a lot, and such people who read a lot become well informed and full, in the sense they have a lot of knowledge assimilated in their minds. Conference a ready man. So conference, a person who is always willing to enter into a conversation, who is good at arguing. Such people are, such a man is always a ready man. Means he would be, he is trained to talk, and he would be, any moment you ask him to talk about anything, he would be willing to do that. That's why conference a ready man, because constantly being engaged in this act of conversing with others, that would make this person ready for anything. We come across such people, isn't it? And you say that you can talk to him about anything under the sun. So that kind of people who always are ready to talk, they are called the ready man. And the third category, he says, writing makes an exact man. So writing again means taking down notes maybe of what you read. It can also be interpreted as some people have this habit of writing down things because they don't want to forget. Especially perfectionists often have this trait. They always make a to-do list so that you will not forget anything, so that you will perfectly do all that you want to do. And so it is a mark of people who do things in a very systematic manner. So that is why he says writing makes an exact man. And so now he just goes further into that idea, and he says a man who writes little should have a great memory, because if you are sure that you will remember all the things, only then you need not write. So you have to have a very acute memory if you don't believe in writing things. Because if you have the habit of writing, you don't have to depend much on your memory. You can just take your book wherever you wrote it. And again, there is this mention of the commonplace book, which during the time of Bacon, it was a very popular practice for young men, educated men, to jot down things in a commonplace book. So that again, I guess must be a reference here. So if you want to be exact, you should write down everything. Otherwise, you should have a wonderful memory power so that you can recall things at your will. And then he says, a person who confers little, confers is talk, confers a little, should always have a present wit. A person who doesn't hone his skills of conversation should have a very ready wit. Similarly, a man who talks little, confer is to talk or engage in conversation. A person who talks little will have to have a present wit. Means he should have the presence of mind or he should have the kind of intelligence with which he can, even without his honing his skills of conversation, he should be able to talk about things. So that kind of a person should have a present wit. So what he says is that if you constantly polish your skills of talking, your rhetorical skills, your oratory skills, that would make you a ready man. If you don't do that, that means you have to be a man with a lot of intelligence, so that even without this kind of training, you should be able to talk about something. And if a person reads a little, he needs have much cunning to seem to know that he doth not. So what he means there is, if you are a person without much reading, you remember what he said about reading? Reading makes a full man. So a person who is well read need not pretend, because the knowledge is there in him. He is full of knowledge, full of information. Whereas a man who does not read much will have to be a very cunning man, because he will have to pretend to have knowledge which he does not. Because he doesn't read, he doesn't know much, but then he always has to put up this appearance or pretend to be a man of learning, and he has to pretend to know the things that he doesn't really know. So that is what he talks about, the impact of reading on different kinds, reading and writing and talking on people. Now he goes on to we are reaching the end of the essay. He says that different kinds of reading or studies, subjects have different kinds of impact on people. Learning a certain subject would have a certain kind of impact on you. That is what he believes. He says, histories make men wise, W-I-S-E, okay? Poets witty, the mathematics subtle, natural philosophy deep, moral grave, logic and rhetoric able to content. So he says, if you learn history, you would become a wise man, because history gives you the stories of so many people who have gone before us, and we gain a lot of wisdom from their experiences. But then the fact remains that we human beings have still not learned to gain wisdom from history. That is why history repeats itself, because if we learn from the mistakes, we wouldn't be repeating them. But what he is saying is this, that if you learn, when you learn histories, when you read the stories of so many people who went before you, it would definitely make you wise. It gives you a lot of information about the world we live in, about the people who went before us, and it also gives us pointers to the future if we are willing to take it. Then he talks about poets. Poetry makes you witty. Here, witty means intelligent. Wit those days did not mean just humor as we use it today. It meant intelligence, humor maybe, but mixed with the intelligent kind of humor. And here he means that when you read poetry, poetry makes you witty, means poetry makes you intelligent, poetry makes you imaginative, it kindles your imagination and your creative powers. So that is how poets make you witty. The mathematics make you subtle. Mathematics is one subject that makes a person subtle, in the sense that in mathematics what happens is you go deeper and deeper and deeper into a problem until you solve it, and there is just one answer where you can arrive at. So the training in mathematics or learning mathematics makes a person subtle or grave or serious. Natural philosophy deep. Okay, philosophy again makes you deep, it makes you think deeper. Moral, that is the studies of ethics, make you grave, in the sense serious, because you start thinking about the pros and cons of everything, you start thinking about the right and wrong of everything. So morals make you grave. Logic and rhetoric make you able to contend. Logic and rhetoric logic is the arranging of things in a logical kind of a commonsensical sequence, and rhetoric is the art of, again, art of argument and art of talking and all that. And so if you learn logic and rhetoric, you will gain the ability to argue and to debate. That is what he means by content. And then there is a Latin, because it is very common in Bacon to come across Latin sayings or sentences from Latin books. So here there is a line which I would read to you, but I am not very sure of the Latin, the pronunciation. Abuent studia in mores, which means that character studies pass into the character. So the sentence that he said just now is also it adds to this particular idea that studies pass into character. And a person, whatever subject he deals with, slowly that subject will sink into him and make changes in his character accordingly. And then he says that there is no stunt or impediment in the wit, but may be wrought out by fit studies, like as diseases of the body may have appropriate exercises. So he takes it one step further, and he tells us that just like diseases can be cured by the correct kind of exercises, physical exercise of the right kind can be a remedy to some of our diseases or illnesses, bodily, physical illness. Similarly, he says the right kind of studies can cure the impediments or cure the illnesses of the mind. So like for instance, he says that bowling is good for stones and rains. So the game of bowling, I don't think he's talking about cricket here, but I guess it's, you know, the bowling that you play in the mall and such thing. So in the process of you taking something and throwing it, it seems it is a very good exercise for kidneys to solve or to dissolve kidney stones. Okay, so bowling is a good exercise to get rid of kidney stones. Shooting, he says, is very good for the lungs and the breast, because you exert your chest muscles. So shooting is good for lungs and the breast. And gentle walking is good for the stomach. That of course all of us know, because after we have our food, especially at dinner, we have this habit of walking a little up and down so that everything settles down in your stomach. So walking is very good for the stomach. It is good for the stomach in the sense it is good for digestion. Again, it is good for us to reduce our pot bellies. So in every way, walking is good for the stomach. Riding is good for the head. I guess that again is because when you ride a horse, he's talking about riding horses. So when you ride, you keep bobbing up and down, and so there is a lot of blood circulation going on. So riding is supposed to be very good for the head. And when Bacon says all this, he is not just being humorous, but since he was a scientist himself, so he knew a lot of he was informed about science and the impact of all these things on the body. So he was a scholar in every way. And so this is the list. So he says this is how exercises can solve, say, physical illnesses. Similarly, if a man's wit be wandering, let him study mathematics. So same way, if a man has a problem with his concentration, his wits are always wandering, he cannot concentrate on anything. So what should such people do? What is the remedy that Bacon suggests? Bacon says that such a man who cannot concentrate on anything should learn mathematics, should get training in mathematics. And why so? For in demonstrations, if his wit be called away never so little, he must begin again. So all of us know this, because at least in school we have studied mathematics, and when you do a mathematical problem, even if you move away for a second, you get distracted for a second, you might lose connection with what went before. So you have to spend a lot of concentration on what you're doing when you're doing a mathematical problem. So that is why he says that people who cannot concentrate on things should get trained in mathematics. And then he says, if his wit be not apt, here wit also means the mind. Okay, so if his wit be apt not to distinguish or find differences, let him study the schoolmen for their simini sectores. So he says if a person is not able to do any subtle kind of thinking, if he is not able to distinguish between two arguments, if he cannot differentiate between what is right and wrong, so in such cases what the man should do is he should read the schoolmen. Now schoolmen are the philosophers of the Middle Ages, and they, he says, are simini sectoris. Simini sectoris, hair splitters, that is the exact word, hair splitters. That is, when they study a matter, they used to study it with such minute attention. Even the details, the minute details would be paid attention to. So they would, that is why they were called hair splitters. So if a person cannot distinguish or find differences between things, in arguments, he should study these schoolmen, and then he will understand how to look at things, how to analyze the various parts of things, how to divide them, categorize them. All that he will understand from these schoolmen. And the next one, if he be not apt to beat over matters and to call upon one thing to prove and illustrate another, let him study the lawyer's cases. So if a person is not able to arrange or understand things logically, if he is not able to say that this something is the cause and something is the effect, for that the best remedy, he says, is to study the lawyer's cases. Now because the lawyers have to find, now when they argue a case, they have to find out precedents. Now when you go to a lawyer's office, you would have seen a lot of books on the walls, bound books, and you would wonder what is there in all those books. Actually in those books they have the precedents, that is the all the cases that went before have been recorded. And so when an advocate is preparing to argue for a case, what he does is he goes back to these books and finds out the precedents, so that he can come to the court and tell the judge that a similar thing had occurred so many years back, and this is the judgment that was given then. And so the same thing should be done with my case too. So a lawyer needs to have this capacity to argue things logically, to put things in a systematic order, to pull up evidences, to prove them. So a person who doesn't have this talent should definitely study the lawyer's cases. And then, just like he begins abruptly, he ends abruptly too, Bacon. So he doesn't bother about a conclusion, he just says, so every defect of the mind may have a special receipt. So he says, thus all defects of the mind definitely will find a special receipt. Here receipt means a prescription, or maybe you can also interpret it as remedy. So there is no disease of the mind that cannot be cured by the right kind of studies. So that is how he puts an end to the essay of studies. So I have gone very fast, but then my intention is just to give you a brief idea about the essay. So you can spend any amount of time on each of these sentences, interpret it in your own way, and that is what is special about Bacon, that he allows you to interpret and understand ideas as you please. Okay, so I hope that was sufficient by way of a brief summary of studies. So I would suggest that all of you read the essay.